So I'll start off. I'm going to talk about who are Bink, who am I, talk about flexible working, some of the collaborative tooling we use, the process that we've implemented for remote onboarding, and some lessons learned and life after lockdown, and then hopefully answer some questions as well. So quick overview of Bink. A lot of you, probably all of you, won't have heard of us because we're actually pre-revenue and pre-launch. So COVID has been come at a particularly problematic time for us. Essentially, what our technology does is link payment cards and rewards with payment cards, so loyalty cards with payment cards. So, and essentially what it means is that if you link your Nectar card with your Barclays debit card, for example, when you go and shop in Sainsbury's, then you don't have to present your loyalty card because we've already matched your debit or your credit card up with your loyalty card. So essentially what it means is that you don't need to carry a bunch of loyalty cards around. So we feel this is going to be quite sort of transformative in the business. There's been lots of sort of advances in contactless payments, micropayments and other things in the industry, yet we're still carrying around lots of plastic loyalty cards and being bothered to take them out of your wallet or remember to carry them or be bothered to present them at a certain time. So for us, it's a very interesting journey. Obviously, there's a lot of bricks and mortar retailers which are closed at the moment. So it's proving quite interesting in terms of driving projects forward and thinking about what's going to happen post-COVID when all the shops are open again and people want to shop and consume. So that's currently who Bink are. If you're interested, we do have a current app out which you can download on the Play Store or the Apple Store and just try it out and see what it does. And then we're going to be launching, hopefully with Barclays later on this year, in the Barclays mobile banking app, and tie a lot of things together in terms of reward balances and loyalty identification, things like that. So it's going to be quite an interesting time, that's for sure. So who am I? My name is Mark Swarbrick. I head up infrastructure for Bink. I've been with them for about 1.5 years. As you can see in the picture below, I've learnt my lesson. Don't pull a silly face when they're taking your pictures for the website. Otherwise, they decide to stick it on one of the display screens for the first 2 weeks. So learn your lesson there. Don't pull silly faces. Before that, I worked for a very different industry. I was a senior pre-sales consultant working for Oracle, helping sell MySQL and other open source technologies. It was actually quite an interesting position because I was working for a very traditional bricks and mortar company where everyone comes into the office, yet I was working for MySQL, which was through an acquisition, through the acquisition of Sun, where everyone was used to working from home and being very dynamic. So we were always seen as the people that didn't wear shirts and didn't come into the office. So there was a definite culture clash between the two. And without bad-mouthing the company that paid my salary for 8 years, they certainly weren't set up for good remote working, good collaborative working, and good working tools. So when I moved to Bink, that's one of the things I wanted to try and implement straight away. Before then, I worked for Level 3 Communications as a service delivery manager, and then before then doing DevOps, Unix and Linux for many years before that. So I've had a few hats on, so jack of all trades, master of one maybe. So that's kind of who I am. So Bink had a policy of allowing sort of remote working and flexible working, but there was still an emphasis on being in the office for key days where there were sort of wider ranging meetings and where there's enough of a quorum. So anyone that wasn't there on those days or couldn't be there on those days essentially did feel like the odd one out. I think there's an advert for Teams which came out recently showing, the Polycom being dragged around the table and not being able to hear somebody. And, I think everyone's realized that, it's been in that kind of situation. And to be honest, it was still like that for us. We only had 2 meeting rooms. One of them had video conferencing, but no one really used it. It was really someone dialing into the Polycom and then trying to remember they're there and then sharing something on the screen and then not being able to see it. I'm sure everyone sort of had that same issue. So in essence, we did drag people into the office perhaps more than they needed to be due to the lack of those facilities. Having said that, everyone works off laptops and there was mixed hot desking in the office. Where our head office is a bit unconventional. So we're based down in Ascot, and there isn't a big tech hub there, and it's a legacy where our founders were and where things started. So in order to attract a lot of talent, we've had people from London, people from Manchester as well. So in essence, people did drive down, but there were hot desking available. There were monitors and keyboards provided at most desks, but all the tooling was accessible anywhere. Like a lot of companies, we've brought in, to other technologies, Office 365, Teams, Jira, remote working, things like that. So we didn't have any physical phones. Everyone had a soft phone. We did have breakout areas, so if people wanted to have like ad hoc meetings or scrums. We do work mainly agile. For those that don't know, it's just another systems development methodology amongst many. But effectively what we do is we work on 2-week sprints with daily stand-ups, things like that. So we had various breakout areas to allow people to go off and have those stand-ups and have those discussions as well. The video conferencing areas were quite sparse, and ironically, the month before COVID hit, we actually upgraded all of the meeting rooms to full video conferencing with full Teams integration. So what this meant is that actually you were, even just simple stuff like being able to look directly at the camera now, like even talking to you guys now, it feels weird to be talking into a camera, but if the camera is above the TV screen and you've got video of the person you're talking to, it makes the people in the room more aware that they're actually talking to somebody else. So this was something we'd sort of just implemented before we had to shut the office, irony of ironies. Management did support remote working, but to be honest, as we're a fintech startup, we had a mixture of people which had come from the traditional banking industry and finance, American Express, people like that, as well as people, like myself that worked for startups and other developers which are used to working from home, or people which have come from other startups and marketing agencies and things like that. So we did have a bit of a culture clash in terms of people that were used to working from home and being flexible, and those who used to wear a suit and get on the train and sit in their office in London every day. So there was a definite mix. So we're far from perfect, but we did have the ability for people to homework. People did. It almost varied per department, whether like our legal team would come into our London office, and see each other pretty much regularly. Our development team tended to be all office based, and they liked actually coming into the office, most of them. So they would sit together. But yet, sort of infrastructure, most of my guys would be sort of work from home at least a couple of days a week. A lot of them work silly hours, so they wouldn't necessarily want to come into the office the next day. So we were quite flexible in terms of that respect. So when COVID hit, what changed? And I think the short answer initially wasn't much, actually. We're in a good situation that essentially our offices were pretty much glorified call centers. There, we didn't have any hardware infrastructure there. Everyone had laptops that were already configured anyway. So really what we did immediately is say to anyone, if anyone wanted to come into the office, they could take any monitors, take any chairs home, get themselves set up for home working. So on the day that we were told we got people in, we got our office managers to coordinate it, and we made sure that everyone was set up for home working on a more permanent basis. What we then got is our management team actually went away and with HR and came up with a lot of the things that Andy mentioned, which I haven't gone into as much detail about. But for instance, what we had is company stand-ups, which were to be done remotely twice weekly. They started at, I think it was 3 times a week, and it was ramped down to 2, just in terms of information and what we needed to update. Essentially what we do is our CEO would then give a chat about what's happening, update people about the situation. Would then have our operations manager who would generally talk about what's going on, and then would either have someone from the program team updating us or anything like that, really. But to echo Andy's comments, it really was about communication being at the core of what we did. And whereas perhaps it would have been an email, or it would have been a stand-up done once a month in the office if anyone was there, we really did make it as a focal point to try and bring everyone together. And again, we tried to make it fun. So to try and get people to the meeting on time, we've got like a little game where we play a theme tune, and the first person to get the theme tune will get some indeterminate prize or something like that. So again, it encourages people to get to the meeting on time and have a bit of fun before the meeting as well, which is nice. We've had we've had these concepts of lunch and learns where we provide lunch for people and they learn something, surprisingly enough. So what we've tried to do is have these remote lunch and learns, which we've started actually on mental health and well-being, supported by sort of our executive team as well. So kind of comments like, look, do as much as you can, and we believe that, you know, you'll do as much as you can. If you need to work flexibly, that's fine, just tell people. Echoing Andy's comments, you know, we've had people who have had to split childcare between them, so we've had people starting at 12 and working into the evening, and vice versa. You know, we've had people, you know, we've actually had one person which has had COVID, so again, you know, to cope with temporary isolation, they've come out the other side of it absolutely fine. So again, it's just about communication, and I think that messaging echoed from the executive team all the way down is really important. It's not just down to individual line managers to say, look, it's okay. We're getting that message reiterated again and again that, you know, as much as I hate the phrase, it is an unprecedented time, and, you know, to try and take the stress off people, because certain people within the organization were absolutely fine. Certain people had logistical nightmares to deal with. And also just coming down to the personality types involved. You know, we've got quite a heavy sort of development bias, and some of those people are definitely on the spectrum in certain functions. So, you know, a lot of people, you know, coping with change, coping with stress, coping with changes of communication, you know, and they've really struggled. So the support that we've had from HR, and as well as remote lunch and learn, and being reiterated by the management that, look, things are different, and, you know, we do accept a healthy amount of give and take, and that needs to be important. You know, we've had HR events, so I think Andy mentioned we've had like remote pub quizzes, which went down really well. People really enjoyed that across teams. We have a virtual beers every Thursday night. It's just an open Teams meeting. If anyone wants to join that, then they can just come and have a chat, which works really well. You know, and I've mentioned we've also had a technical lunch and learn on collaborative tooling. One of the things that quite quickly became apparent is that people's knowledge and ability to use Teams, file sharing, things like that was quite different within the business. Some people relied on being in the office, and certainly our legal team were very old school, and they really needed some help in sort of using some of these tooling. So the actually being able to train people and support them was really important as well. So everyone likes an animated slide, so I thought I'd chuck one of those in. So luckily we've pretty much bought into a lot of the Microsoft stack. So we rely on Microsoft Teams for video and audio calling. We have already various chat channels in place. We did use Slack, but we've moved to Microsoft Teams for everything now, just because of the integration, much to our development team's disappointment, but they are getting used to Teams, so I think we're going to win them over eventually. But just the ability to have, we've got fixed channels within the department, which are locked down, you know, for security. We deal with a lot of finance information, personal information, things like that. So we need to think about the security and PCI aspects. But we also have open channels. We encourage each of our teams to actively talk to each other on a daily basis. One of the things that HR tried to roll out initially was this sort of enforced calling each other and being social, and, you know, almost mandating that you have to call this person, you know, everyone on your team every day. And I think the question that, you know, people had, what didn't work? And I think initially we went too far the other way. And people were saying, especially managers, look, I spend all my time on the phone asking people if they're okay, and they're fine and just want us to go away and get on with their jobs. So I think learning about the different personality types and allowing a flexibility within each team, whether it be development, BA, marketing, sales, you know, development, whatever it is, allowing them a certain amount of flexibility to work how they want is really important. We use Jira for ticketing and any kind of work requests between departments. So one of the things we've had to do is tidy up the Jira ticketing, because where before we could just go over and have a chat or pull people together, I think there's had to be a certain maturity around documentation requests, change requests, things like that as well. So we've had to bring that in. I think the same is echoed for SharePoint, for sharing of documents. People were kind of unaware how that tied into Teams, so we needed to do some work around SharePoint, a bit of education, a bit of training, and a bit of tidying up as well. That ties into the documentation side of things as well. So we use Confluence for a lot of our documentation. So again, tidying up of that. And I'll come on to new starters as well, because it was apparent that there was a lot of information in people's heads, more than I would have liked. It was something we were aware of, but certainly improving the state of Confluence pages, the quality of our documentation, and the ability to be able to share that between departments and talk around it became really important as well. One of the other things that we had kind of half implemented that we've fully implemented now is Trello. We use that as a to-do board. It's really useful for me to see what's on my team's work list. It's essentially a combination of Jira and Trello, and it's a really, really good way of me being able to manage what people are doing, whether work's been done, whether things are blocked, what the dependencies are, and just for people to manage their workload and what's going on. Again, I feel quite blessed that we're working, this happened in 2020 and not even 5 years ago. I think the quality of the tooling, the collaborative working, even internet speeds and, being able to do video chat, I think a lot of people would have struggled with 5 years ago. Incidentally, it's some of the things you don't even think about. I've got one support desk guy, and the poor guy spent the first week pretty much debugging people's home Wi-Fi connections and figuring out why they couldn't, why the video is dropping out, because everyone is very sort of quick to blame Teams or the infrastructure, but actually we found almost 50% of the problems were kids at home, watching HD videos on Netflix and their iPads, and people's internet connections struggling. So we actually ended up being pretty much an ISP support help desk for about the first week, getting people set up so they could actually use a lot of these collaborative tools properly. The same goes for audio video settings, headsets, all that kind of stuff as well. So one of the challenges for us is we were growing rapidly. So we've had to onboard, I think so far 12 people remotely, even do interviews and tests and things remotely as well. So this is a process that we've kind of started, but really needed to refine. So we're at the process now where we can essentially provision hardware and get it sent out, configured directly to the new starter without actually even any of us having to touch it, which I think is a really nice situation. So we have the process where HR will raise a support desk ticket for the new starter. The service desk will then procure the laptop and any equipment directly from Apple. Then essentially through Apple Business Manager, this equipment then gets posted direct to the new starter. And given how long postage is taking and the turnaround time where we were hiring some developers, for example, if we'd had to get the hardware sent to us, configured and sent to them, it would have actually sort of lengthened our recruitment cycle, which isn't great. So we use some software called Jamf, which essentially will automatically pick up on the particular hardware of the laptop, and then once the user opens that laptop, will automatically configure and push down all the software they need. So we can speak to the hiring manager directly, ask what software they need, if they're a QA or a developer, what access they need, what software they need. And we've got all profiles pre-configured to be able to push it out to them. So when this happens, the service desk person will contact the new starter, just tell them to expect a laptop, tell them what the tracking number is going to be, and to explain the process of what's going to happen when they're onboarded. So what happens when they get their laptop, hopefully before their first day, but we have done it on their first morning, what will happen is the support desk will give a hardware and software induction. Now, I think as Andy touched on, I think this is really important. Some people haven't used Macs before, some people haven't used Teams before or collaborative working. So just the ability for that first person to have a couple of hours as their first thing dedicated to this is how you communicate, this is how you talk on Teams. We've actually got quite an in-depth tutorial which one of our internal trainers has put together, where we actually work through all the ways that we collaboratively work within Bink. So this is, even silly stuff like, what Teams channels we've got, what we expect people to do, whether it's, it's okay to message people, don't expect to reply straight away. This is the kind of culture we're trying to engender. So all of those different aspects, we've tried to build into the induction. So it's not just a sort of IT crowd style, this is your computer. It's very much on the social side and how we actually communicate together. Once we've given that induction, HR uses Teams and a video conference to welcome them to Bink. So they essentially get to know the HR or HR rep, even if they haven't been too involved with them during the recruitment process. They've got a person to call, they've got a contact, and HR will go through all of the initial inductions, P60s, payroll, how to contact people. And HR, essentially, they use some software called Bamboo HR. And what this will allow them to do is to have checkpoints, checking in after the first day, first week, induction period, all of that kind of stuff, to make sure that they're okay, as well as their line manager. So it gets the feeling that they're not just sat in the desk on their own. It's not a process we haven't thought about. We want to make them absolutely feel part of the team. And it's HR's responsibility to make sure that they're called out during the company stand-up, for example, that there's a new starter and what they're going to be doing, all of that kind of stuff. Our line manager as well is the next port of call, so they will give them a call, welcome them on board, and essentially lay out their first week's diary. So again, really similar to Andy, to what you've mentioned, which is really nice to hear. So what we do is we give them an agenda, we say, look, this is what we expect, and we actually have sort of scheduled meetings, depending on the department, with different people to welcome them to the team. If, for example, they're a developer, there'll be a daily stand-up anyway, so they're automatically included on the daily stand-ups. Again, with a lot of the laptop provisioning, when we provision them as a certain user in a certain group, that will implicitly give them all the permissions they need for teams and stuff like that. So it does mean that, nothing's worse than a new starter and going, oh, are you on the right distribution list? Or I didn't get that message. And, it doesn't give a nice impression of somebody, when somebody starts, so that they've been looked over or there's an oversight. In our company stand-ups as well, they'll be called out. What we initially did is ask them to say hello and tell them a little something about themselves. We found that this was either something people loved or something the new starters absolutely hated, depending on their personality types. So this is where I think that you need to be aware of being too prescriptive, and just because you're an outgoing, bubbly person and you want to get to meet everyone doesn't mean that every new starter is going to be like that. So we had a developer that said, I almost wanted to quit because I was forced to go onto video and to say hello to the entire company at once. For him, that was like the worst possible thing we could have done for them. So again, this is where the line manager will speak to them now and just say, look, are you comfortable doing this? Using a one-size-fits-all in terms of everyone must communicate and everyone must talk to each other and everyone must go on video, I would be a little bit sort of hesitant to do that. As a company ethos and policy, absolutely fine, but at least get people's buy-in before sort of thrusting everyone's good ideas on all the new starters, I think. So I think that the next thing just to talk about is just lessons learned and life after lockdown. What I'd love to do is take more of the things that we've had to implement quickly and make them better. So having just said about video conferencing and not forcing it on anyone, I'm going to contradict myself completely and say more use of video conferencing. So I think one of the things which people have commented on, it's actually really nice to see a face and it does connect to people. So I think using video conferencing and having video conferencing on a screen is going to become the new normal. We have a remote office in South Africa, and the best feedback we've had is from both of them saying, you know what, the lockdown has been amazing for us because for once, we're not the only ones on a video screen on our own feeling self-conscious or on a crappy Polycom trying to hear the audio of everyone in the room. It's a leveler. So what we want to try and do is, we've already got plans to go back and make sure that all of our breakout areas, even if they're just little areas, have TV screens, a decent camera, decent field microphone, so people can be heard. So if you are remote, if you are at home, you don't feel, like a third-rate citizen. So yeah, all the meeting rooms to be equipped like that. One of the things people have found is, communication actually. Because you have to be more considered and think about it. Communicating between departments we found has actually improved since you can't have casual side conversations. So we've had to examine how we work in terms of departmental stand-ups, intercompany stand-ups, program management meetings, who to bring to those meetings, all of that kind of stuff. So we found that just taking more time out of your day to talk to people is really important. I manage a team of 6 within the infrastructure team, and a lot of them were personality types that really struggled with change. So I was initially quite frustrated that I had to spend a lot of time at first, asking people if they're okay, coaching them through their day, excuse me, sort of micromanaging them a little bit more than I would, and just taking time for them to bed in. Once I've done that, we've implemented things that I didn't have before, like a daily stand-up, even 20 minutes. I found is fantastic, just to make sure that they're all talking to each other, to make sure that they're happy, and if there's a problem from the day before, I'll invite somebody else onto our daily stand-up and actually get it all out in the open. Even if it isn't particularly relevant to one person in my team, just everyone knowing what everyone else is doing, I think has really improved my department. I've had the same feedback from the development team, from the BA team, and architecture as well. So just a little bit of structure. It doesn't even have to be long meetings. We found has been really useful as well. In terms of flexible working hours, we didn't really have that before, but what we've actually found is that scheduling of meetings can sometimes be a bit more problematic if someone's doing childcare before 12. But what we've essentially managed to do is people tend to be happier to be more flexible. I'm not sure if this is because the pubs are shut and no one's got anywhere else better to be anyway, but people are prepared to say, look, I'll take a call at 7 o'clock, that's fine. Or, that kind of thing. So we've actually found that more flexible working has meant that my team have been able to make changes out of hours. And I've said, yeah, don't bother logging in till 12. That's absolutely fine. Whereas before it would have been a more formal on-call, call-out. So just thinking about working hours a bit more flexibly, I think has been really good. Another thing that's come up is the clear use and training of tools. I think as an infrastructure team, we've been very guilty of, because we understand it, we've rolled it out and we expect everyone to grasp the fact that your SharePoint files are available in the Files tab under Teams, and you can create a new channel here and create alerts here and all this kind of stuff. So actually training and use of the tools enables people to get buy-in, and once you've got buy-in, then the tools work a lot better, and then it goes forward in a really nice progressive way. The security of home working, I think as well, is being aware that whilst we could have got away with things in the office with office firewalls, when people are at home, we've had instances of we've had a lot more virus alerts because people have been on their home networks, things have been hitting our firewall, things like that. So just thinking about the security of home working, especially for us where we need to be PCI compliant as well, and we're under a microscope in terms of the bank's schemes and things like that. So definitely more work on our IT security. And also, I think one of the biggest takeaways speaking to other people is just making the time count. So I think people just sort of used to going to the office because, oh, there's a meeting or blah, blah, blah. But now I think there's a lot of people going, when I'm in the office, I'm going to absolutely make sure that I spend time talking to people, that I make that time really count in the office. So I think for Bink, it's been challenging in terms of our project life cycle and working with other industries which are perhaps being more closer affected than us. But I think there's actually a lot of benefits that's come out of this in terms of collaborative working. I think we're very lucky that we were set up for a lot of it to start with, in terms of our tooling and the fact everyone was on laptops and a lot of people were used to home working. But I think the social element, the company atmosphere, and the buy-in from upper management, and sort of to allow that to propagate all the way down to, yeah, you're a human being and we appreciate the work you're doing. It's not just a case of we want you to continue working just as you have been. It's acknowledging that people have challenges, personal, everything else. And I think HR being a lot more visible in training and support for people has really been appreciated as well. So I think there's a lot of positives to come from this. Anyway, I've yattered on too long, so I will shut up now. But if any